Today we're going to talk about image trace, which in very early versions of Illustrator were also called live trace tools. And what these tools allow you to do is to convert bitmap images, which are images that utilize pixels, such as TIFF files, RAW files, any photographic version of a file like a JPEG. Those are bitmaps, and those have their place in design. But the downside to bitmap imagery is that it is pixel-based and therefore limited by its resolution. And what that means is that at some point when you scale that image up, the resolution is visible and it begins to fall apart. Some people call it a pixel grid, so you might be able to see the pixel grid, or for instance, like with JPEGs, you may start to see the JPEG, what we call artifacting, which is where the edges of the color start to kind of fall apart and get blurry. So that's the weakness in bitmap imagery, is that there are limitations in the resolution, and that doesn't just impact your ability to print the image, it impacts your ability to use the image in a lot of different spaces and to resize and reformat the image. And so it may be that you'll find vectors are an option. Now, vectors, as we've been exploring, are used for a lot of different kinds of graphics, for logos, for illustrations, for typography. And the reason vectors are so wonderful is that they are shape-based. And when I say shape-based, they are based on these paths that we have learned about throughout the course so far. And these paths don't have resolutions, right? A shape is sort of geometrically defined by angles, edges, and points, and therefore it can be scaled up to any size, right? It's great for a billboard. You're not going to get a blurry artifact when you're dealing with a path that's going to print for a billboard. But if you are dealing with a photograph of a letter and tried to print it billboard size and you took it on your iPhone, well, it is going to start to fall apart. So vectors are a wonderful option. And it's also a great option for those of you that are illustrators and do still use pen and paper, and you want to convert your drawings into a usable graphic in Illustrator or any of the other Adobe programs. So it's converting a flat bitmap into a usable, editable vector object. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do this. We have two complex images, and you, when you're practicing outside of this exercise, you can use simple images. You don't have to use complex, but it's kind of fun to see how a complex image converts into this image trace tool. So right now I'm in my Illustrator space. I currently have my workspace set to Essentials Classic. That's what I work in, that's where I'm most comfortable, but that doesn't mean you can't use a different workspace. Know that all of your windows are available here within the window menu. So just a little reminder, if for some reason you cannot find a window, which will happen to me probably throughout this demonstration because I'll close windows, I'll cover up windows, I'll move them around. If you can't find a window that you need, go to this Windows menu and check out if your window's actually open. If it is open, it will have a checkbox next to it. So not very many windows are open in my workspace right now, but I do have my application frame visible and my controls visible. And then as far as the toolbars are concerned, I always use advanced because I want access to all of the tools available in Illustrator. If your toolbar on the left side of your screen looks much simpler than mine, it may be that you have it set to basic. Okay, and it gets a lot smaller. you can see over here it's gotten a lot smaller. So just a little reminder as we move through the course that my screen, my workspace may look different from yours because Adobe does kind of remember your workspace from the last project that you've worked on. Alright, so I have set up my file to be a 10-inch by 10-inch file, and I know that I'm going to be using my layers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my layers icon here, and actually I'm going to pull my layers window out because I know I'm going to be using it. So just to save myself a little time, I'm going to keep this open. And because I'm an instructor, I always change my panel options using my hamburger menu to something with large thumbnails, and that's for your sanity while watching my videos. Alright, so I've increased my thumbnail size to 80 pixels, which is much larger than the I think 20 pixel format that it's normally set to. And we can see that by default in Illustrator we have layer 1 created. It is currently blank with no objects on it, but we are going to place an object into this layer. Okay, now I'm linking to this object, and if you wanted to see other import options, you in fact could and make some additional selections. But I'm going to link this object here. Okay, and this is the image portrait JPEG. And I'll click in the upper left corner of my artboard and it will place this image. As we look at it, we notice that the image is too large for the artboard. So what I'm going to use is my properties window on the right hand side here, and where it says W, I am going to resize to 10 inches. So by default this is 14.2222 inch. I'm going to resize to 10 inches, so it's exactly the size of my artboard. I'm also going to make sure that my width and height, W and H, are linked together. Okay, so you want to see these chain links here because we want to resize without any distortion. So I'm going to type in 10 inches, press return on my keyboard, and that will resize my object. And I'll use my selection tool V to move this onto my artboard to center it. Okay, this image was developed by Midjourney. If you've never heard of Midjourney, it is an AI tool where you can type in a description of the image to Discord, the Discord bot, and it will output images that match your description. So I created this in Midjourney, and if you want to go explore that, please, I welcome exploration. So it's kind of a cool tool as an instructor for getting images that are not necessarily covered by any sort of copyright or licensing. Okay, so we have our image here, but we are going to convert it into a vector. So as you can see, because it's an image, it's a linked file, there's no real changes I can make to it, right? Because there's no path for me to edit. But what we're going to do is we are going to convert this into paths, we are going to edit it, and then we can even bring in some other images as well to add some complexity and depth to the overall design. So I'm going to keep this object selected using my selection tool V, and notice that as an image is selected in Illustrator, within your toolbar, and again I have my control panel open, so if you don't have that open in your Windows settings, open it now and make sure your application frame is also open. Okay, we want all of these visible, because with this selected we are going to notice that we can do something called an image trace. Now when I have this object selected under my properties, at the bottom of your properties window, you will see options that are related to image trace. There are other options too, like editing in Photoshop Photoshop or masking this or even cropping. Okay, so there are other options for editing photographs or images within Illustrator, but we are specifically working with Image Trace today. Okay, now Image Trace is a funky tool. It is going to convert my pixel-based image into vectors. There are options. If I look here next to my Image Trace button, there's a tiny arrow pointing down. That's going to give me all of my Image Trace options, including something called a high fidelity photo, a low fidelity photo, 3 colors, which means it converts this full grayscale image into only 3 colors. 6 colors is the same thing. It chooses 6 colors, most likely on a grayscale for this one. 16 colors, which is more complex. So the more colors, the more complex your image trace is going to be. You can select shades of gray, something called logo, sketched art, silhouettes, line art, and technical drawing. Now, I do not expect you to go through every single one of these right now, but in your free time, explore these, and if you select any of these, it is going to give you a preview. Okay, technical drawing is kind of a weird one. So this technical drawing did not seem to work very well with this image. I would suggest something like technical drawing really would work only with a pen and ink drawing on a white piece of paper. Okay, so that didn't work so well. So we're going to change that. When I selected that preset for technical drawing, notice that this control changed. Okay, so now we're in our image tracing settings here. I can see that in the upper left corner with a preset of technical drawing. I am going to change that because clearly this is not the end result that we are looking for. I'm actually going to change this to 3 colors. And depending on how complex your photograph is and the output into Image Trace, the longer it's going to take to preview it or convert this. Okay, but 3 colors looks pretty good. I still can see my image. Now notice that what was white is now gray. And we can change that in a moment. Once we're happy with our preset, there is a small button here with an Image Trace panel. Okay, I'm going to click on that button to open up my Image Trace panel. And there are some additional options. So the preset is at the top that we've already selected. We are currently viewing the tracing result. Now, there are other ways to view your image trace. You could view it with outlines. Okay, so that's going to give you an idea of what your paths are going to look like. You can also change it to only outlines, which is kind of cool if you're really just trying to simplify it into what the paths are going to be and see that result. Outlines with the image source or just view the source image. I'm going to go back to tracing result with outlines because I think that's a really easy way to see what Illustrator is doing. And then you can even change your color mode from color to something like grayscale. Let's see what that looks like. I'm not sure it's going to look that different. Oof, that's a lot of grayscale. Okay, so when I did that, it did a full 128 color grayscale. I'm going to change my preset back to 3 colors. Sorry guys, we're going to keep this simple. And if you navigate down to where it says advanced, there is an arrow to the left of advanced, and that will give you even more options. Where it says paths, low versus high, that's fidelity. So low fidelity is going to somewhat simplify your paths, and then high fidelity is going to make it as close to the photographic detail and edges as possible. Same thing with corners. Okay, less corners is going to simplify a path. More corners is going to make it closer to the photograph. Okay, which means more. So just think more complex, more photographic, but also more slow. So if your computer's already struggling with image trace, don't start making high fidelity paths and corners. You're going to be upset. It's going to slow down your computer. Um, but I'm going to leave these as they are right now by default so we don't get too confused. And I did want to highlight what the method is. So abutting means that it's almost two-dimensional if you think about it like a puzzle. So paths are created around each other, okay? And they abut. So they're up next to or against one another on a two-dimensional plane. A second method that exists is something called overlapping, which means that it will create paths that are stacked. So that may mean that this background is a solid black square, and then it has a gray shape on top of it, a lighter gray shape on top of that, and then a black silhouette to make the figure on top of that. So it's building up in layers. And so it's up to you. You, again, as you get more comfortable with image trace, may want to explore these two methods because there's a reason for each one. And depending on your creative process, you might find that one makes more sense than another. There are moments when I really want things stacked because I'm dealing with like a solid background color, and I just want everything to have a gradient in that particular layer, right? And so I don't really want everything cut and puzzled together like an abutting trace. So there's reasons, there's methods to the madness, but just know there are two different methods. So sometimes you might want to try stacked to see what the result is, and sometimes you might want abutting. And then if your photograph or image that you're working with has a lot of white and you want that white to be completely ignored, you can turn on ignore white. Okay, so if we did that, we actually don't see much of a difference, okay, because there's not any white here. But know that ignore white can be very convenient. And again, if you're working with logos or hand drawings, it may be that you don't really want the white outlined. You just want your pen drawing outlined or something like that. So you can turn on ignore white, and then it won't map out whites for you. Okay? All right, so that's the image trace panel. That gives you all of the tools for really controlling the output of this trace. Okay, I'm going to close this by clicking the X in the upper left corner. And now that we're happy with how these paths look, we are going to find the expand button. Now mine is in the upper center of my control panel, but also you can find it under properties at the bottom where it says expand. Okay, so expanding this now, if we look at our layers, right now our layer object is called, this particular object is called image tracing, but if we click expand, it is a group. Okay, and it becomes a group because expanding an image trace converts those shapes that are visible on screen into actual editable paths. So if I scroll here, you can see all these paths. All right, so that's pretty cool. I have to be honest, that's kind of cool. And what that means is I can take something like my direct selection tool. A is my shortcut key. I'm going to deselect everything for a second. A is my shortcut key, and I can go in here to this group and select very specific objects. Okay, so each one of these paths that's been created is an object. And what that means is I can color it in a new color. I could delete it. Okay, that's an option. And I can even edit it. Okay, now some benefits to image trace, and I only chose a 3-color image trace to make our lives simple. But the nice thing about image trace is you can do other things. For instance, if I wanted to color everything in right now that is this light gray, I can select this one path that has this light gray fill. And then I can go up to my select menu and select every path that has that fill color. Okay. And what I could do is I could say, hey, I'm gonna actually make everything that is this color a new color. Okay, so I'm gonna go over to my fill swatch here, just double click it, and I'm gonna find a new color. And it could be any color you like. But I'm going to choose a new color just because I want to show you what you can do. So I did a select. I selected one object that had a light gray, and then I went to my select menu and selected all the other objects that had that exact same fill color and changed it. Okay, and I can do that for all the grays here. So if I select this more darker gray, again, I can navigate up to my select menu, same fill color, and I can change all of these at once. So let's choose, oops. I think I accidentally clicked on something. Choose a new color. It's up to you. But it just gives you a little more depth to the image rather than having it pure grayscale. And again, you can zoom in here. I'm just going to zoom in here. And anywhere that you want to delete some of these paths, you can even select them with your direct selection tool and just remove them so that this figure sort of stands out a little bit more against this white space. All right, now not only can you change all the colors, you can delete these paths, right? So let's say I don't really need these figures in this lower right corner. I can just press delete. Okay, just one time. If you press it twice, it's going to delete everything that's attached to that path. Sometimes that's not what you want, but if you wanted to kind of clean up this portrait, I'm just selecting, press delete one time. For these, if you want to delete more, you can press it twice, but just know it deletes anything that highlights. So right now if I press delete, it's starting to delete a lot because of the way that it was, the way that these paths were built with the image trace. We have some shapes that are a little bit they're a little bit more complex than what they appear because some of these shapes are overlapping one another. Okay, so we're getting down to where it's a little bit complicated to delete some of these shapes, but we're going to try and see what this looks like. And then if we need to, we can clean these up. Yeah, we don't want that. So this shape in here is acting a little strange. It may be that we just need to find an anchor point and move it. I can't quite figure out where this black shape's anchor point is. Ah, there we go. It is here. Okay, so you can go in and do this. Please don't feel like you have to do this right now during the exercise. Okay, but you can see, so this is the thing about image trace is, I'm going to go backwards, is it can have some unintended consequences because you didn't build your paths yourself. So for instance, what we're seeing here, just trying to delete some little objects, they're all connected because it's not sophisticated enough to know what your intention is as a designer. So what I'm going to do to just hide this little object is I'm going to take my pen tool. I'm going to make a little white object here. You might want to zoom in. And I'm just going to make a little white object to cover this up. Oops. Fill this with white. and that'll just cover it up. Okay? No big deal. Little trick there. Since I'm going to keep this background white, I'll leave it that way. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you the benefits. So we've already seen some benefits, right? We've taken a photograph, we've simplified it using image trace, we've recolored it, and we've removed some of the extraneous objects here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, and this is the fun part, and I am going to edit these paths. Okay, so I'm going to take my direct selection tool, A is the shortcut key, and I'm going to zoom in on one of these eyes, and we're going to turn it into a heart. So I'm going to take my direct selection tool, click on what would be the anchor point here, and I'm going to just drag this anchor point over to the center of the eye. Don't panic. Press P to access my pen tool. I'm going to add an additional point. So see how there's a plus sign? We can add another anchor point there. Access that direct selection tool again. Move this new anchor point up. Move this one a little more down into the center. And oops, I lost my handlebars. This is when it gets a little complicated because we're dealing with small paths here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little heart-shaped pupil. So we need to add a new anchor point both at the top, which is what we already did, and then at the bottom here. I'll just add one anchor point with my P pen tool. A for your direct selection tool to select this anchor point. And we'll just move this up. Expand our this is when stacking the paths would have helped. We're going to expand our shape. Okay, and we're going to do that on this other side too. So I'm going to press P to add an anchor point, A to select the anchor point and move it inward, and then A to expand this outward. And we may have to adjust this other path that's underneath. This is an example of when abutting is a little problematic. I'm going to add an anchor point here, move this anchor point up, and then add an anchor point down at the bottom here, and then make these adjustments. So what happens is the abutting means that it's almost like a puzzle. So when you change one shape, there's another shape that probably has similar edges. So this black shape is underneath here. So actually I need to adjust the black shape so that it fills in the white. So I'm just going to take my direct selection tool and just adjust this black shape underneath so that it fills this in, so there aren't white spaces. But you can see we can keep editing this and making it a pretty heart. We could make it look like a Banksy heart if we wanted to. We can use our convert point tool. I don't know why it's not working. There we go. And make adjustments. And again, you'll have to adjust the black below unless you ended up doing the stacked paths, which will look a little bit different. So you'll just have to fill this black space in. Oops. Command Z if you accidentally select something that you didn't mean to select. Okay. So you can go in and make these adjustments, which is kind of fun, to the paths that were given. And remember, you're not limited to always using these paths, but they're kind of like a starting point, right? So you can go in and just like before where I made the little white shape to hide something, you could make shapes on top of these. But this is a great starting point if you really wanted something to line up with an image or a drawing that you already had and create paths that match it. Okay, so I'm going to just go in here and make this heart shaped as well, which is a little more complicated because it has extra points. And all of ours is going to look a little different because image trace doesn't always end up making the exact same result depending on your system. But again, I'm using the pen tool to add points, the direct selection to move points around. And again, you kind of have to zoom in here to get a handle on what's happening because we did not build these paths. It was automation, which sometimes does not make for pretty paths. And you can just keep editing some of these. So I kind of like the idea of the heart-shaped pupils for a musical design. So I'll just keep editing these. And it does not have to be perfect. It could be a little kind of matchy of the style that already exists on here. But that's kind of nice. Okay. So that's image trace. And you can use it for anything. You could take pictures of signage, of objects, of silhouettes at sunset, and bring them into your Illustrator and have editable paths that you can alter, recolor, add to, change, right? You have all of these options. And you're not limited to using just one, right? You could bring in a different image